So majority of the audience identified the most friction in mismatched connectors or components, but second to that were validation challenges. And I was curious if you're at all surprised by that, but also if you could lend any advice to either advice or reflections on either of those to the audience.
I'm going to just try and add something to this so that Frank and Mark can. For me, mismatched connectors or components is an easily solvable thing when someone desires to use the standard bioreactor or mixing bag, or it is likely to have the component on it that is from the major manufacturer or one of a minor number of choices. And then the interconnectability to another unit op is limited because you may have vendor A for the first thing and vendor B for the second thing, right? But design a tube set that does everything for you in between, maintain a few, maybe 6 SKUs of all different manner of interconnection devices or conversion devices, and you can then concentrate your demand on those core pieces of your process on standard bioreactor mixing bag, something like that. What do you guys think about sort of customizing on the small bits and letting the big bits be standard? Yeah. But Mark, you said transformation was more important to focus on customization. So I think we're on opposite sides of the fence here.
No, not at all. I think the bioprocessing experts or the product experts need to focus on those transformational steps. Me as in the old days as just a single-use plastics guy, I shouldn't be telling these bioscientists how to do anything, really. I should be supporting them. But move a fluid 2 meters from one side of the room to the other, I think they should be quiet at that point and just use one of the standard pieces and move on, right? So one of the first things we did as a single-use engineering group at Merck was to design, and I apologize if any of my former colleagues are on, they can correct me, but one of the very first things we did was to design a set of, we call them jumpers and adapters. A jumper moved fluid from A to B with the same connector on each end, and an adapter moved fluid from A to B with a different connector on each end. The adapters tended to be fairly short. You would just convert and then move on. The jumpers tended to be longer. We made them in a set of, small, medium, large, extra large, until another project would come along and need a different length. And then we would try to fit, into one end or the other. Or we introduced people to the idea that 2 medium jumpers equals 1 large jumper. And we tried to reduce this set, but this kind of thinking and this kind of decision making is really important to the business, but it's really far removed from the bioscience or pharmaceutical science that many of the people who are involved in procuring single use are more interested in. So I've always found it helpful to have some people who focus on the equipment part of this and partner closely with process people. And I think you end up more successful as a team, unless you get some really unique process people who are able to kind of change gears and think, like you were saying, Paul, what's this going to be like 10 years from now versus get a clinical lot out today. It's challenging to meet all of those needs. But once you get those part sets together, those collections of, transformative things or standard holding bag or waste bag sizes, you can stop designing those, provided that in your company, you have a way to keep people from stopping designing those. In a smaller company, I've found it's about as hard as it was in a big company. Any supplier can call any of my colleagues at any time and vice versa. The next thing you know, there's some drawing coming by my desk and people are saying, how do we qualify this? What is it? Where did it come from? It happens more, sure, in a bigger company, but it can happen at any time. And the suppliers in our industry, in the single-use industry, pride themselves on customer service, customization support. Most of them are very good at it, which has helped, but it also contributes to some of this bad behavior, I guess I would call it. But, Yeah, Tyler, I don't know. Do you want to grab some of these questions that were in the chat, or what's the protocol?
Yeah, unless you saw one specifically you were going to that caught your eye. I was looking
Well,
through here to find.
I just want to throw validation challenges at Frank, right? So from for me, this is the way that validation challenges came to the top. I think what this says is the audience or the poll survey respondents are reluctant to double their validation work in order to create interoperability. Frank, what do you think that that's the right interpretation from my side?
I think what I do. Nobody wants to do more validation than they have to do. But I also strongly agree with having some of the jumpers at hand that are pre-validated so that when you get in a pickle, you can daisy chain those things together to get to a solution. And I have been known personally to write some really ridiculous protocols that seemed absurd, but that was the idea. Was yes, there's probably a simpler solution from a logistical standpoint, but have we gone through the individual components? Have we tested their compatibility with our drug product or whatever intermediates that we're at? And I think that that's where those mismatched connectors can really bite you. Is and this is honestly speaking of where the industry has grown up a lot. That I'm going to bet it's gendered connectors that is particularly getting people, where you see an NPC fitting on a drawing, you've got an NPC drawing on or fitting on a separate drawing, and then something comes up like somebody seals the wrong tube on a bag or what have you, and then you've got to make something to go from male to male NPC, and that's not going to be the case with genderless. But yeah, the for connectors specifically, the validation protocols for those types of jumpers aren't that bad compared to some of the more complicated tubing assemblies out there. And I think having an arsenal of those at hand is well worthwhile.